Welcome to the program. Today we talk about one of the most important battles now taking place in America, and something that you probably haven't heard about. We'll start with this.
There's a debate. There's a debate going on.
The de-investment of higher education was occurring across the country.
On one side, you have Bobby Jindal and a man named Grover Norquist.
I offer people a taxpayer protection pledge.
He came up with an idea to persuade politicians to sign a pledge that said that they would never vote to raise taxes.
I will not raise your taxes.
Grover Norquist is a grifter.
We starve the government by reducing tax revenue.
They're designing the system to fail. You make sure that a public institution cannot perform its duties, and then you blame it for failing to live up to its goals and performing its duties.
I think we all agree now college costs too much, delivers too little, and it has to change.
Before any of our young people take out student loans, that school has to tell you how much you can expect to make.
We need people who come to the federal government and ask for money to pursue something that has some demand in the economy.
These reformers decided that universities were the problem.
And they say that education is a commodity.
They've started a fervent political campaign under this mistaken guise that students are consumers rather than students and future citizens.
You can commoditize it, you can charge for it. It's just another thing out there. It's a barrel of oil, it's an ounce of gold, it's a stock. It's anything.
The existing system creates barriers to entry that limit competition.
There's $150 billion in federal financial aid that is on the line.
It's created a very toxic ideology.
The fallout continues tonight over the ousting of University of Virginia President Teresa Sullivan.
Tom Ross is the president of the UNC system. He was shoved out by the UNC Board of Governors.
Mike McKinney, who was the chancellor of the Texas A&M system at the time, was pushed out.
Some politicians became at odds when powers refused to implement a series of reforms that make the university more like a business.
The governor is calling his plan Act 10 for the UW and says he believes they can handle the $300 million cut he's proposed.
Because of our reforms today, there is no seniority or tenure in our state.
For them, criticizing the government is political. That definition of political means, therefore, it can't be uttered by a university professor. Then think of the vision of the First Amendment, free speech, and academic freedom that's left. Professors cannot criticize the government.
Any institution hates to admit that it has a problem. They all want to say, look, we're just like we were before, everything is fine, and that would be a lie, because we have been hurt.
If you want your son or daughter to get a great education, you better be looking at MIT or Stanford or one of the great private institutions. And it's a tragedy, really.
The new film is Starving the Beast. It premieres this Friday in Charlottesville at the Violet Crown Cinema on the downtown mall. Siva Vaidhyanathan joins me. He is the Robertson Professor of Media Studies at the University of Virginia. And Siva, you are featured prominently in the film. You are interviewed throughout the movie. What's this about?
Well, the film takes into account a number of different incidents that have happened in a number of different states over the past 5 years. In each case, someone in power makes a rush at a state university to try to alter that university. In Wisconsin, it was a matter of slashing state funds, crushing the faculty union, and basically removing the legal protection for tenure. At the University of Texas and at the University of Virginia, it was an attempt to remove the president of the university, basically chop the head off the university as a way of making the faculty cower and hopefully, in their view, installing a president who would completely remake the university. At the University of North Carolina, they were able to force the chancellor out. But in addition, they went after particular faculty members who they were concerned were doing research in areas that the enemies of the university weren't so happy about, research on poverty, and the hint was pretty strong. Like, if you are going to research poverty, try to find its cause, its effects, its things you might do about it. You're going to be in the sights of the powerful in the state. I would imagine that would extend to climate change as well. It was basically a warning that professors at state universities had better watch themselves, had better narrow what they do. So we're seeing state after state after state. We've seen a version of this in Iowa, although that's not recounted in the film. We've seen a version of this at the University of Louisville, where the governor tried to fire the entire board and is being stopped in court right now. We're seeing this at Purdue University. We're seeing this at Illinois, in the entire state of Illinois. the legislature has blocked the higher education budget from going through, the higher ed appropriations from going through. And so you have, throughout Illinois, public colleges and universities unable to finish out semesters, unable to have checks clear, students who can't graduate. It's a real tragedy in Illinois. In fact, I think right now the state of Illinois has the biggest higher education crisis in the country, and it's really sad. And you know, time after time after time, it's an ideologically driven effort to crush all that is good and great about higher education in America, public higher education, especially the research that goes on in higher education.
So what happened in Charlottesville in June of 2012 with the attempted forced resignation, well, for a time successful forced resignation of President Teresa Sullivan, there were so many of us in Charlottesville that saw that in a vacuum. Well, this is a unique thing happening at UVA. It's a unique dynamic with these particular people. But as this film so beautifully illustrates, this is happening right now all over the country, and increasingly so. We're only seeing more and more of this kind of thing.
There's a whole series of ideologically driven think tanks, and I use that phrase advisedly. They don't actually think that much, but they are tanks. And they've been rolling through state universities all over the country. So what happened at UVA was dramatic. It had the virtue of having a single personality as the sort of initial victim of it, and that was President Sullivan. It also had the virtue of having closure to the story because, you know, a couple weeks later, through basically an uprising of alumni and students and faculty and the community in Charlottesville, the handful of board members who had tricked President Sullivan into resigning basically cowered and folded, and we were able to get back to normal. In fact, I would argue we're stronger than we ever were before since then, and we can talk about that in a few minutes. But what happened at UVA shouldn't comfort us. Just because the good guys won in the summer of 2012 and UVA's been doing pretty well ever since, we have to be aware that this is a nationwide movement. They're going to come after UVA again. They probably won't use the same tactic, but we should be ready to defend and explain and champion the work that goes on at public universities, or this community is going to be in big trouble once again.
The leader on the Board of Visitors at UVA in June of 2012 that led the effort to get rid of Teresa Sullivan, Helen Dragas, there's reports now that she is launching a new nonprofit.
It's a political action committee. That's really what it is.
To raise money to change higher education in Virginia. The buzzword she keeps using is affordable excellence. So help people understand, well, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with affordable excellence? What does she mean? What do they want to do?
Well, what she would like to do is gut the core of the university, basically research. You know, she has no interest in the fact that this is a university charged with producing knowledge, with helping to cure cancer, with helping to figure out the causes of climate change, with helping to make sense of our condition, the effects of immigration, the effects of literature, the effects of racism. These are all things that we as faculty and students and graduate students and staff are all supposed to be making sense of. We are that part of society that is supposed to try to get a handle on all the turmoil. We're supposed to look forward in a long term. We're supposed to make sense of what just happened and what happened long ago. And along the way, we're supposed to serve society in some very explicit ways, whether that means figuring out how to build better roads and bridges, and we have lots of people at UVA doing just that, or figuring out how to treat heart disease or how to treat cancer better, and we have plenty of people at UVA doing just that. Helen Dragas is not interested in any of that. She is interested in the sticker price for an undergraduate education, which we are all interested in. But she is very dishonestly flattening out that formula into a simple matter of what is the bottom line that the university has in its budget versus what is the sticker price of a four-year degree at the University of Virginia.
And
those
what's the ROI? I mean, it's all about ROI, right?
Yeah.
Return on my investment. I write a check for my kid to go to school. I want to know how much they're going to make with that major 2 years out, 5 years out, 10 years out. You tell me, and if you don't meet it, I'm going to sue you.
And if this university or any university were in that simple a business, it would be a very different thing. You know, we would be the University of Phoenix. That's what the University of Phoenix does, right? But we're not. We're in the knowledge production business. And a lot of what we do is incredibly expensive. But what's more expensive is not doing it. And so what we've had go on in the past couple of years is, first of all, the folks who run the money at the university, the investments, the various funds, the various endowments, have been both really smart and really lucky. We know the stock market has surged over the past 5 years. We know that they have invested wisely. We know that the university runs a very lean and efficient machine. I mean, there are universities with lots of administrative problems. You know, UVA is remarkably free of those headaches and those extra things that raise questions. You know, so we've done very well with our money, and as a result, we have been able to address the one big threat to the university. The big threat to the university is that because federal research money is going away, this country is basically giving up on science. We are in danger of having all of those expensive labs go dark if we don't take pretty strong action. That means finding creative sources for funding. That means making sure we have the staff support for our faculty to take advantage of what federal funds there are left. It also means being able to connect the interests of faculty members to other institutions that might help fund research. That means perhaps military contractors or the Defense Department. It might mean private individuals who take a particular interest in a research area. You know, maybe some group of alumni have had family members suffer from Alzheimer's. That could generate support for research. So we're aggressively exploring all those different areas to help fund our research. But what really threatens UVA's reputation is the notion that the research money and thus the research activity could dry up. But the brilliant thing is that the Board of Visitors, working with the administration, has figured out a way to pool its resources in a really efficient way. It's created a fund, a strategic fund, to make sure that UVA remains among the leaders of research universities in the world, not just the country.
So that's not a slush fund, as Helen Dragas has made national news saying UVA's got a secret slush fund of a couple $1 billion.
Yeah, if it were secret, she wouldn't even know about it. But of course, there wasn't. I mean, she's lying, really. She is a completely dishonest person. Her level of dishonesty is well documented, as it was in 2012. She has not been straightforward with the people of Virginia in her explanations of what she learned on the board. She knew all about this, they all knew about this, and it was very clear what it was intended to do. It was intended to centralize a series of funds
that already existed.
And were growing very well as a result of excellent management of these funds, and put it in a way that a committee of some of the smartest people at the university could then distribute these funds in very strategic ways to make sure that we can retain the lead in certain research areas, and in fact, move ahead in other research areas, right? So if we did not have this fund, if we did not do this sort of activity, we would be dead in the water as a research institution. And you know, UVA would not be considered among the leading universities in the country. Within 5 or 10 years, it would be a sad, sad moment. And everybody with a UVA diploma would suffer because of that. But more importantly, the state and the country and the world would suffer because a lot of really important knowledge would not be produced. Everyone involved in the university at the highest levels understood this, and that's why they made this very wise decision to gather all these disparate funds into one to focus it on research, the #1 priority right now. So there was no trick being played, and that money is not fungible in the sense that you can't just use it for anything. We can't use it to build a new scoreboard at the stadium. We can't use it to build new dorms, and we can't use it directly to put off necessary tuition increases that are the direct result of the fact that we still underfund this university from state appropriations.
And that's part of the larger story, right? And the larger problem that's driving this assault on higher education is the defunding of education that we've seen in America, especially at the state level for higher education.
Exactly. And in Virginia, look, we have always had at Virginia public colleges and universities a small fraction of the money per student from the state that Maryland and North Carolina have committed. So we can't even compete on that level with our most immediate geographic peers. That said, over the last 20 years, every state in the country has seen, with maybe one exception, has seen a steady decrease in state appropriations. Look, when I was a public university student in the 1980s in the state of Texas, in-state tuition was a few $100s for every semester. And it's steadily gone up, but it's steadily gone up as the state has reduced its appropriation per student to the point now where tuition at the University of Texas is about $12,000 a year. It's still an incredible bargain. It's about the best $12,000 you could ever hope to spend if you're a young person in the state of Texas, which is why so many hundreds of thousands of students would like to go to the University of Texas. But it's significantly more than $500 or zero, which is what it was a decade earlier than I went, right? So by percentage, it looks like the University of Texas is gouging its students because it's, it basically has a tenfold increase in tuition. But in fact, what it's done is made up for the reduction in state funds. And what it does mostly is charge students who can afford it the full value and supplement through financial aid for lower income students. Now that math doesn't always work for low income students. So nobody is really taking care of low income students the way they should be. Nobody pretends that's the case. But if you look nationwide and you track, you can actually write out a graph of state tuition going up. It goes up at basically the same rate that state appropriations go down. If we wanted free or close to free public higher education in this country, and I'm not convinced that's the right way to go, but if we wanted it, we could totally afford it.
Bernie was talking about it in the primary. Hillary Clinton now says she wants to do it.
Right. All we would have to do,
it's doable.
We could tax a few more yachts. We could tax millionaire estates at the level we're supposed to. If that's the choice we want to make. It might not be, right? But we certainly shouldn't pretend that the increase in tuition that's gone on is the result of anything except that steady disinvestment of public money. Now, the disinvestment of public money is a major story, but what this film Starving the Beast gets to, the film that's opening Friday here in Charlottesville at the Violet Crown, is that there's more than the financial attack. There's an overt political attack to gut the influence of faculty over how universities are run.
So much of the ideology of the attack seems to be driven, it's business speak. It's from almost a corporate mindset that these universities should be run like big businesses with a strong CEO. And we see around the country corporate CEOs being brought in some places to run these big public universities.
And that's definitely,
help us understand what's the distinction
from
your perspective as somebody who's worked in academia your whole adult life.
Right.
Help people understand the difference, because a lot of people watching think, well, that makes perfect sense. It's a big institution, you got a lot of employees. Yeah, run it like a business.
So here's the thing. The people who run American businesses are a diverse lot. Most of them are very well educated and very well educated at major public research universities, right? So look, the president of the University of Iowa now, the new president, is one of those corporate guys. He's actually a failed business leader, a disaster, and he's quickly established himself as a disaster as a university president. That doesn't mean that all business leaders would be disasters as university presidents. There have been some excellent ones. There have been some excellent former governors, former senators, former generals who've been university presidents. Nobody says you have to have a PhD to be a university president.
It's a great point,
right?
Yeah.
But it's also important to remember that the successful ones understood the difference. They understood that they couldn't just take lessons they got from McKinsey's consulting days and apply them to an institution as diverse, as committed to public service, as committed to a time frame of results a century down the line, as one of these, as a research university, especially a public research university. That the stakeholders are more than the stockholders, that the stakeholders involve children who might want to go to this university, patients who go to the hospital, the thousands of people who work at these universities, the communities that surround these universities, as well as the faculty and the students and the alums. And basically the taxpayers of every state benefit from the work done at these universities, and the citizens of the entire country benefit if the research is done well. Now, there are some really smart corporate leaders who understand this. They get this, and they're the ones who sit on responsible boards and contribute good ideas to the university. They're patient. They ask sharp, smart questions, And we've been fortunate here at the University of Virginia to be able to work with a tremendous number of these really smart business people because they get it. They understand that universities are necessarily inefficient. They are necessarily kind of wastes of money, right? Because money goes down chasing experiments that never succeed, and that's how it's supposed to be. Money goes after books that 10 people read in a century, and that's how it's supposed to be, right? Money goes to enhance our quality of life in ways that cannot be counted and accounted for.
Money goes to maintain things like a philosophy major.
A philosophy major and a crew team.
Right.
And an emergency room and a children's hospital and an agricultural extension station. And those things are so unalike, and yet they're all part of the mission of a major public university, And so what we have to remember is, look, American agriculture is the best in the world. People say that about a lot of things in America. This is the best in the world, right? The one thing we know is the best in the world is American agriculture in terms of efficiency, in terms of productivity, and in many ways, it is one of our most successful exports. Right? The United States would be a lot poorer if agriculture were not run as well as it is. And one of the ways we know that agriculture is successful, we know that agriculture is successful largely because of our big state universities. State universities like the University of Wisconsin, which has been gutted by political attacks. The University of Illinois, gutted by political attacks. The University of Iowa and Iowa State, both gutted by political attacks. These are the universities that have created knowledge that helps farmers work better, that helps crops grow with fewer pesticides, with less water, that helps our crops travel farther so we can export them and trade them for other things. Those are the sorts of technologies that have real world effect. Often the research that was done to make those happen happened 20, 30, 40 years ago and didn't yield immediate results. And again, the people who really understand this, the smart and wise business leaders of this country, get it. What they want are employees they can hire who are both smart and wise, who are more than trained, are fully educated. They know because they want creative people. They want people who can communicate well, who can write well, who can think about what happened 100 years ago, what mistakes were made, how we might avoid them in the future. People who can be community leaders and responsible citizens and responsible parents. Yeah. That's who they want working in their company.
I can remember in June of 2012, or the summer of 2012, when I interviewed you on the radio, I remember you saying, look, we're not making widgets here.
Yeah.
And we're up against an ideology of people who that's what they think. They think of students as customers, and that a university is like a big machine just cranking out widgets.
Yeah, printing diplomas. And look, we could go there. We could do that if we wanted to. It'd be a lot cheaper. My job would be a lot easier. I'd probably have a lot more free time. I wouldn't have to think the thoughts I think and write the books I write. I could just get in there and set up my online quizzes and stand up there and spew out a bunch of stuff that I'd read in other people's books, and then test my students on it and go home at the end of the day. I think if that's the way we want to do it, we can do that. It'd be a big waste of my talent. It'd be a big waste of my students' time. What my students appreciate, and the reason they chose the University of Virginia over any other university or college in the country, is they want to be in the room with people who are thinking big thoughts, who are making big advances. They want to be invited into the lab. They want to be invited into the seminar room. They want to be handed a draft chapter of a book and say, yeah, I'm working on that. Why don't you look through this and give me your feedback? Because that's what I do with my undergraduate students, and there are hundreds of other professors at the university who share their work in progress and invite students into the conversation. And that's when the lights go on, and that's when you can just see the blood flowing in their brains, and you can see them making connections and bringing in fresh thoughts and challenging the status quo, which is me. And that's what's fun. That's what's joyful about the experience. And the university, the ideal university, is a place of joy, not just when you win football games, which we haven't done enough of, but it's a place of joy because it's about being surprised by an idea, being inspired by a poem, being moved by a play, and taking all of that and melding it into an experience. And that is why people look upon their years at UVA fondly. It's not because of a football game, because unless you went during a very short period of time, they were mostly losses. It's because of the experience of that communal experience of a bunch of smart young people in rooms, in labs, on stage with a bunch of inspired, experienced, knowledgeable older people, and part of this communal project. That's priceless. Yes, it's expensive. It seems wasteful, but the people who really look at it and the people who really value it understand that we are the richest nation in the history of the world. And if we can't afford that addition to the quality of our life, we are denying ourselves. We're robbing ourselves as well as our future.
It seems like the UVA is the perfect illustration for the epitome of this struggle, because when you look at its founding documents and the vision that Jefferson and Madison had working together to give posterity this gift of this unique and new kind of institution, it was not about the bottom line. It was not about making money. It was not about profit. They specifically said this will be about training future generations with knowledge and virtue to, as Jefferson said, to watch and preserve the sacred deposit, to ensure that the strengths and the ideals of citizenship and liberty are preserved and are strengthened. It's all about civil liberties and human freedom.
And regular viewers of your show know that we both work together on a project called the Center for Media and Citizenship at the University of Virginia. And because we share this commitment and this interest with Jefferson and Madison. And look, what happens at the university, any great university, is a process of forging the citizens who will be calling the shots next. Right? No republic can survive without an educated citizenry, without new ideas flowing through, without fresh perspectives, without arguments, well-structured arguments, informed arguments, not just banter and screaming. And so our work here, and this show is an example of it, is an attempt to model that out, to show the world that we can do these sorts of conversations, hold these sorts of conversations in an informed way. And so we do it in practice here, but we do it in the classroom. Both of us teach at the university. We do it in our day-to-day interactions with our students, because they signed up with us knowing they want to be part of that tradition of becoming the next wave of influential citizens and responsible citizens. So we're in real danger in this country. If the public university systems are gutted, if the faculties are muzzled, as we're starting to see, how is the republic going to survive? Not just where's our next treatment for cancer coming from, because that's huge. Not just who's going to figure out how to deal with this climate change thing, because Google's sure not going to figure it out. Those are huge, important things. People will live or die based on those questions. But we cannot survive as a republic. The republic will fall before the shores erode. And that could create a more immediate danger. One of the greatest things we've ever created in this country is this network of public universities. And they have educated countless thousands of people the first time in their families, first generation of their families, right? They've literally saved lives, saved communities, reinvigorated entire states. They are the jewels of most states in this country. And the envy of the entire world, and we're totally taking them for granted.
Siva, thank you very much.
My
Thank
pleasure.
you for being here. The new film is Starving the Beast. It will show at the Violet Crown Cinema in Charlottesville, Virginia, this coming Friday. Don't miss it. Make sure you make an opportunity to see it. I'm Coy Barefoot. You can find the complete archive of this program online at mediaandcitizenship.org. Have a good week, and you all be good to each other.